Hello, I'm Joy Rene, and I'm here to help you on your awakening journey. Welcome to the first ever episode of MiVidaLoca, My Crazy Life. This is basically my life uncensored, my life story, my side of the street, and I'm actually going to be using the direction from my higher self and my guides. I can't promise perfection, just my authenticity. Now, I will be discussing topics that could be triggering. I encourage you to try to set down or set aside any differences or anything that you don't agree with. I just simply want you to take what resonates and leave the rest. Remember, this is my life story. I don't judge, and I'm definitely not in any competition with anyone. I'm here to speak my truth, and it's my intention to help as many people as possible. Please trust your inner self, your inner guidance always. And also, any messages that come through while channeling are meant to be confirmation for you to what you already know and what you already feel. Trust yourself. And I don't know why I'm so nervous. I'm literally just sitting here talking to myself while I'm recording. I don't have an audience. I don't have anyone with me. But I'm still extremely nervous about sharing my story. I want you to understand that it's been an extraordinary journey for me. And it's been very difficult. But everything that I'm about to tell you is true. And I have no reason to falsify anything or lie. I'm not a very good liar. I suck at lying. I've always been horrible at lying. All right. So I just want to get that out of the way. Because some of the events that have happened in my life have been, like I said, extraordinary. Most people don't live through what I've been through. Most people that have been through a childhood like mine don't really live to tell their story. Most people who've been through the things that I've been through, most people, first of all, dissociate from, deny that they've ever been through anything, or they really do hide it, like they're in denial. But I want you to I'm urging you to please don't compare yourself to me, because I'm not going to compare myself to anybody except my past self. I've learned that through the years, not to compare myself to other people. All right. So let's get started. First of all, I just wanted to say, for those of you that don't know me, I am an INFJ/T. Go look that up. It's a personality test that I took a while back. The first time I took it was in college in South Dakota. And I found out I was an INFJ T. And then later on I took one more recently, and I ended up being an INFP, which is pretty interesting. And I think that it's because I've been masking a lot through my life. And masking is basically putting on a persona or a personality that is fake in order to survive. So since a very small child, I've had to pretend to be okay, which is pretty sad. I didn't know that I was doing these things until I was 45, 46 years old. And here, well, today I'm 46. So yes, today is my birthday, and I'm 46 today. But a lot of this stuff I didn't know until my awakening in 2020. And what's weird is that I got sober way back in 1999. I have been off meth and sticking needles in my arms since December 10th of 1999. So I had no idea that I was doing these things, you know. And so when I went through the 12 steps the first time with my sponsor and everything, and I did the 4th step and the 5th step, which is basically going through the 4th step and looking at what my part in it is, right? It never came out. A lot of my trauma never came out until here recently, because I had stopped dissociating from it. And what I mean is, in my own mind, I basically pretended that the things that I went through as a child didn't happen to me. It happened to someone else. I separated myself from my trauma. Okay, so a lot of the stuff that I'm going to tell you, I didn't really know about. I didn't remember it until I'm like I said, I'm 46 today. And these are things that I've just been learning the past 4 to 5 years since my dad passed away and my mom passed away. All right. So what happened was my body was so full of grief and sadness and just toxicity, basically, an overwhelming amount of emotions in my body that I had been carrying around. It was extremely toxic. I had no idea I was carrying it around, though. Okay. I really did think that when I was doing my 4th step, I was getting it all out. I really did think that when I was working the steps, I was being 100% honest. I really was. With the ability or the level of perception I had. The level of enlightenment I was at the time. However you want to look at it. Because we're all here to level up, right? So anyways, I had to look at things like I was neglected. And that's so weird because my parents painted such a good picture of how everything was normal in my house that I had no idea that I had lived in and I was raised in a toxic environment. I had no idea that the things that I had been through were abuse. I had no idea until recently. You know, I actually heard from, this is something I learned from Teal Swan. I know she's not everybody's favorite, but she's definitely got some really, really good information. And what I picked up was doll syndrome. And doll syndrome is basically my parents made me look good for everybody else, but then when we were at home, I got put back on the shelf or basically just ignored. I was ignored a lot. Anything happened to me, any trauma that I was experiencing, my parents ignored it. I guess they prayed for it or whatever. You know, praying does nothing unless you take action. Praying does nothing unless you take action. You can pray for me and my trauma, but until you actually give me a hug, it's not really going to do anything. Does that make sense? So anyways, I had to look at somehow I had been molested. Somehow I had some kind of sexual abuse. And that carried out into my friendships. And my parents ignored it. They never, ever addressed it. They never addressed people being mean to me. They never addressed any of my emotions. They never validated me. They never validated my emotions. They never validated my pain. They never validated when people were mean to me. For instance, I was at the YMCA and I was in swimming lessons, and this little girl was basically drowning me. She was holding on to me and pushing me down, and unintentionally, because she's a child, but nobody helped me. I was like drowning, and literally my mom sat there and just watched. It was so weird, like the weirdest thing. And I come to find out that unless you've dealt with your trauma, you can't see someone else's trauma. I'm going to say that again. Unless you deal with your own trauma, you have blinders on. You can't see other people's trauma and pain. You kind of look at them like, why are they struggling? I got over my shit. And you kind of put them down a little bit, don't you? I know I have been there. I'm just as judgy as the next. Remember, I'm an INFJ, which is judging. I'm really good at judging. I'm really good at reading energy. I'm really good at being intuitive because of the abuse that I had to endure. I had to kind of plan ahead. Okay, well, if this person's mean to me, then what can I do to make them not mean? It was as if I needed to change so that they would change their behavior, right? That was imprinted in me since I was a young child. I've had to deal with my parents overlooking my trauma because they never dealt with their trauma, and then we have this taboo or whatever. We look at people weird when they go to therapy or counseling, and it's like, dude, counseling's not a bad thing. Counseling's actually handling your shit. Counseling and therapy is you actually taking care of yourself, putting yourself first, which is absolutely necessary in the society that we live in today. You've got to put yourself first. You can't put other people's opinions or needs above your own. You just can't do that. Unfortunately, I was imprinted since birth, conditioned, program, whatever you want to call it, to put everyone else's needs, wants, emotions first. I was basically raised to be the assistant, the side character, not the main character. Sorry, I had to pause because I can't do this without a drink. Whew. So anyways, yeah, honestly, you just cannot see anyone else's trauma unless you deal with your own. And it's sad because those people are generally mean to the ones that have been traumatized. People are straight mean to traumatized people. Traumatized people have been so misunderstood that they become mean. Some of us can become extremely mean and hateful and aggressive. And until we deal with our pain and trauma, we're going to continue to be mean and uncompassionate. It closes your heart chakra. It closes down your energy centers when you don't deal with your emotions. Trust me, I've freaking done it. You got to take my word for it. Trust me when I say that if you shut down one emotion, you shut them all down. It's impossible to shut down one emotion or not feel something without not feeling a whole bunch of other things. That's what keeps us in ignorance. That's what keeps us from being accountable for our own behavior. It's not okay for me to take my trauma out on other people. That's how I was raised, okay? So, back to the traumatized childhood, which I really don't want to revisit, but I really want people to understand my side of the story. So, I had some sexual thing happen to me, which carried out into my friendships. My parents, or at least my dad, was aware of it, but never did anything about it. All right. So I'm already extremely confused by 6 years old because I'm unvalidated. My feelings aren't valid. What happens to me doesn't matter. And everyone has a right to my body. And I don't have a say-so at all. That was how I felt. A disempowered child. Unable to speak. Unable to speak my truth, because even if I did speak my truth, nobody listened to me anyway. They still don't. People still don't, you know. So I really had to let go of expectations and outcomes, because I can't continue to live my life trying to make other people happy. It's really not my job. First of all, it's my job to make me happy. It's your job to make you happy. You know, I'm only responsible for me. And I need to be accountable for my behavior, right? I'm not allowed to be angry and abusive to other people. Just because I had trauma. It's not okay to yell at innocent people. Or how does the phrase go? It says, if you don't deal with what cuts you, you will bleed all over people who had nothing to do with it. You will bleed all over people who never hurt you. And then they become hurt people too. And it's perpetuated. But it ends with me. This trauma ends with me. These cycles, generational curses, it all ends with me. All right? Okay, so I was forced to go to church as well, so we're going to throw in some religious programming and disempowerment as well. I was born a sinner, and I accepted Christ into my heart at 5 years old. I feel like a lot of the stuff that I was taught from the Bible directly is not true. It just keeps people in a state of disempowerment. And keeps them separated from themselves, because people are constantly looking outside themselves for a God, looking outside themselves for a savior. You know? But anyways, so I had all that religious programming in there too. So then I basically was punishing myself for being a horrible human being. And I went with that. Completely disempowered, confused, unvalidated, abused. I had already had sexual trauma before I started school. You know? What sucks is that my parents never got me into therapy or counseling. I really, really needed it. I know my sister tried, but I didn't quite understand, because it wasn't something that I was familiar with. And I didn't understand the reasoning. So I'm going to try to keep it brief for my first episode. But there's so many crazy things we're going to get into. So I don't want to bore you with just trauma. I'll skip ahead a little bit. I'm going to fast forward to, let's see, summer before high school. So I was about 13, right? Going on 14. And I had never dealt with any of my trauma or anything. I was still thinking that there was something extremely wrong with me. And went to high school. And I honestly did my best. I really did. I was bullied at school most of the time, up until junior high, where I started to stick up for myself. But honestly, nobody ever stuck up for me. So it was just something that I had to learn for myself, how to stick up for myself. I'm still learning that. How to, set boundaries and stand by them and speak my truth. This is just, for some people, you would say, oh gosh, that's just basic. But for me, it has been just ingrained in me to make everyone else feel better and not bore you with who I am really. And that's sad. So here I am sharing who I am really. I mean, this is who I really am. So, unfortunately, I made it to high school before I started acting out. Before that, I didn't act out a lot. I did what I was told. I followed the rules. I got good grades. And it got to a point that I believe it's called a split with borderline personality disorder. I didn't get diagnosed with borderline personality disorder until I was in my 30s, I believe, in 2007. And, or actually it was 2006. 2007 was my first marriage, which was a huge mistake. But borderline basically is a personality disorder. We are a product of our upbringing. We are a product of trauma, unfortunately. BPD and PTSD and CPTSD is extremely similar. In fact, some of ADHD symptoms too, extremely similar. However, because my parents prayed for me and they never did anything to help me, actually, I suffered. I suffered a lot. I'm gonna be honest. It was extremely painful. I was so hurt. I carried so much pain around. I was extremely sensitive. I didn't feel like I belonged. I felt like I was a fish out of water. I didn't feel like I fit in. Anywhere I went, people judged me. You know, people compared themselves to me or whatever it is. Whatever it is, the way I looked, the way I dressed, it was the way I existed. It wasn't good enough for people. People always picked me apart. And unfortunately, I wasn't given tools to protect myself. Instead of saying, hey, that's not right, you're hurting my feelings, or saying anything to stick up for myself, I thought it was me. There was something wrong with me. I internalized it. That was my mental health. That was my autism. That was my ADHD. That was my borderline. Now, I know I have ADHD because before I had borderline, I had issues. I had hella issues that were never addressed, and they were ignored or prayed for, whatever. It's the same thing to me. Praying and doing nothing is basically the same thing to me. All right? Sorry. I don't pray for people anymore. I send energy. Because sending energy is a conscious decision that I'm literally focusing my attention and my energy on sending it. It's just, for me, it's more real, okay? So if praying works for you, I'm not trying to offend you. I'm just saying, for me, it was really fake in my family because I never really received the help that I needed. And so because of that, I was trying to fix myself. And I made it to high school. And then my parents say I went to bed one person and woke up another. And I believe that was my borderline. I split. I was a completely different person. It was as if I had enough. I had had enough. I had had enough of trauma. I had had enough of their toxicity. I had had enough of the bullying at school. I had had enough of all the pain that was never addressed, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. You know, I needed help. I'm gonna be honest. I really, really needed help. I had really, really needed to know what to do with my emotions. I really, really needed to know that there was somewhere on this earth plane that I was safe. And I found that safety with men. I'm gonna be honest. But before men, it was friends. And so it was usually extremely toxic, traumatized individuals like myself that I attracted. And we were attracted to each other, obviously, because we didn't know. We didn't know how much pain we actually carried around. But our soul did. Our soul did. So I was always around people. It was the stoner group. And I went to La Sierra High School in Riverside. So I hung out in front of Vons, in front of this place. It was a donut shop called Hot and Fresh, I believe. And we used to hang out in front of Hot and Fresh every day. And these were the people that smoked cigarettes, we kind of ditched school. They dropped acid. They smoked weed. I didn't do any of that stuff yet, but I was 13 to 14 because I had just started, and so I was young still. But they were the people that they accepted me for who I was. Okay, they didn't judge me. They didn't compare themselves to me. In fact, my boyfriend at the time yelled at me because I had done acid. I had taken a tab of acid, and he yelled at me, and they yelled at him. In fact, they yelled at him and chased him off, and then I ended up breaking up with him, and just going on because, yeah, that wasn't cool. But I needed to do what I needed to do, and unfortunately, it was different from what he was doing, and so we separated at that time. But that was the boyfriend, Sean Kettlewell. He, I gave him my virginity, and, he was my very first, boyfriend, and I went all the way with him. And then later on, unfortunately, I found out that he had passed away. If you look up Sean Kettlewell in Riverside, he was killed on the 215 freeway by a battery flying over the center divider and hitting his vehicle. And the reason it hit his vehicle is because a domestic violence dispute on the other side of the freeway where a man was chasing his woman and caused a wreck. And unfortunately, the battery flew over and hit his vehicle. Crazy, right? So there's that, unfortunately. Just things, I feel his presence, though, I can call anyone that's ever passed away. I want you to know that you can call on their energy and they'll be there. They're there. I had also lost another boyfriend, too. Ghost, that's coming up. As one of my boyfriends. He's one of my first boyfriends, and his name was Ghost. Obviously, that was his nickname. And, I'm going to have to come back to Ghost because I completely skipped over a whole period of time, and I can't do that, so I have to back up a little bit. After that split, right, I woke up another person. I just couldn't tolerate it. My rebel phase began, I guess, and it was like my sovereignty started to wake up, and I believe that it had a lot to do with me dropping acid and activating my third eye, unintentionally, but it did happen. Because of that, which obviously was meant to happen for my life because I had a lot of work to do in this lifetime in a short amount of time. So what I did was I was a runaway. I was a runaway. The first time I ran away was with Shauna Kettlewell. I ran away. It wasn't even like I intentionally ran away. I just decided to walk him home. And I know you're not from here, but if you know Riverside, I lived in La Sierra off of Pierce, and he lived in downtown off of Center Street, and we walked there. And it took us until 3 o'clock in the morning. And of course my parents were terrified, because they were losing control over me, of their perfect daughter, right? Doll syndrome. I had made the family look so good and so perfect. How dare I, express myself separately or different from them or what they're doing, right? Anyways, yeah, I was a troubled teen, I guess. Y'all could have had me on the TV shows Ricky Lake and shit, because I was really, really angry at my parents. And that was my borderline. Unfortunately, borderline comes up if you've suffered a lot of trauma. If a person has suffered a lot of trauma, it can damage a person to the point where they're angry. Yes, trauma causes people to be angry. And it's actually pain that does that. It's because I decided to turn my pain into anger as a protection mode, so that people wouldn't hurt me. I was tired of being hurt. People just did whatever they wanted to me. I was sleeping now with boys. After Sean, I didn't really sleep with a lot of people. Of course, I was extremely picky. Obviously, I was 14. But yeah, as a runaway, I lived in dirt fields. I lived, why? This is crazy, you guys. I literally chose to sleep in dirt than to live in my parents' house. I chose to sleep in dirt. In fields. In the back of cars. Than to go home and deal with my parents. Because they made me feel so awful about myself and guilty and ashamed. And I was tired of feeling ashamed of myself. Sorry. This is me uncut, so I was so tired of being ignored and the pain being ignored that I just left. I ran, and I didn't want to have to deal with them. All they did was make me feel worse about myself. They never did anything to help me, okay? They made me feel ashamed for sleeping with boys. They made me feel ashamed for doing drugs. They made me feel ashamed for running away. They made me feel ashamed. Instead of being a support system or, you know, understanding that I'm obviously troubled. I'm obviously having issues. I need help. I needed help. Right? Because I had been dealing with being molested and I didn't even know because I dissociated it. So I didn't know why I hurt. I didn't know why I was angry. And so when people asked me why I was angry or why I was yelling at my mom and dad, why? You know, why was I breaking shit? I didn't understand that my behavior was a direct result of trauma. I had no idea. I mean, from the outside, I looked good. I even had a pony when I was little. I had Cricket. My parents got me my pony. Finally, I manifested that thing. It took me a long time to manifest my horse. I tried so hard for many, many years to manifest my horse. As a child, I didn't understand that I was manifesting, but I had a lot of gifts that were being ignored, you know, and told that I was weird and stupid. And I was told to sit down and shut up instead of accepting what I had to say, you know, or helping me deal with my trauma. You know, how about that for once? Instead of just blaming me for my behavior, find out why the behavior exists, you know. It was messed up. It was messed up. So anyways, I was with Henry. Henry is the one that got me pregnant. And it was weird because he was Filipino and extremely spiritual, like meditated and all of that. Okay. So I had very little knowledge of that from him. And he came to me and told me I was pregnant, which was really weird to me. But he did. He came to me and was like, "You're pregnant." And I was like, "No, I'm not." But I found out a few months later I was. Now, mind you, my birthday is obviously today, so September, and I found out in December that I was pregnant. So I was 15 for like 3 months. I was pregnant. I was already 3 months pregnant. Or something like that. And I went to the doctors, and I remember it was like a dream. Like, it wasn't even real to me. Like, the doctor's like, "Yeah, you're pregnant. Congratulations." And my mom was like, "Really?" You know, and I'm like 15. So I'm sure the doctor was like awkward as fuck. But I mean, what can you say? Of course. So I was like, okay, at 15, you know, all right. What do I want to do? Do I want to keep this child? And my parents, I'm gonna be honest with you, at that point were extremely helpful in a way. They weren't perfect by any means, but they were helpful. And they tried, okay? I'm gonna say they tried, and through their own programming and conditioning, they really did want the best for me. Okay, so overall, I just see them as having a lot of issues that they never dealt with, and I can forgive them. Okay, they really did the best that they could at the time, and they did the best they could with me. Okay, and I forgave them for that, especially now. But anyways, dang, I was with Henry, 15, pregnant. Oh my God, what am I gonna do? You know, I didn't believe in abortions, so I was like, well, abortion's out. I'm not even going to consider it. I would have never considered that. At even 15, I was not considering it. It just wasn't for me. All right. So I was like, well, if I'm going to go through it, I'm keeping it. And so I went through the pregnancy, you know, when I was about, at that time, when I found out I was pregnant, I had a boyfriend. His name was Ghost. His real name was Banning Lane, Lane. And they called him Ghost because he lived in Compton, California. Yes, that Compton. He lived off of Santa Fe. And his family lived off, what they called it a yard. So the yard was located across from a factory. That's all I remember. I know that there was a Jack in the Box down the street, and I know that I was not allowed to wear red. Okay, it was forbidden because of the gangs there in Compton, and I literally got in trouble for wearing a tiny bit of red in my. I had a flannel, it had a tiny bit of red, and they were like, "No, it's forbidden." So I had to like not wear red there. It was crazy, but it's true. I lived in Compton, and then for a while people were joking about Compton, and I'm like, "What's fucking funny about Compton?" It's dangerous. It was pretty scary for me because it was a rough neighborhood. Really rough neighborhood. And it was run by gangs. You know, I can't say their name. I just won't because that's that's not why I'm here. But they're obviously Crips. But because their colors were, you know, I believe theirs were blue. All right. So they flew blue colors. All right. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah, so there's that. And what's crazy is Ghost's sister, Tawny, was in a biker gang, and they all rode Harleys, and they owned a Harley shop in Long Beach. So, yeah, this is just insanity. So I'm living there, and I mean, I'm kind of doing meth, but not really because I'm pregnant, so people aren't giving it to me. Smoking weed never really bothered me during my pregnancies. It helped me a lot, to be honest with you. But ended up getting, it was so crazy. We ended up stealing a car. We stole a car. We wanted to get this 4-wheel drive, but it didn't happen. So we ended up test driving this Honda and just leaving with it. We took it from Compton all the way to Riverside. And we did that on March 10th of 1993. And the reason I know that is because we did that because my mom was having hip surgery. It was hip replacement for my mom. And so I came and I was worried about my mom. I really did love my parents. You got to understand. I really, really loved them. I was just really, really mentally messed up, you guys, okay? So I really did care, all right? And I was a caregiver for my parents. My mom was handicapped my whole life, so I've always took care of my mom, all right? So I've always took care of my mom. I want you to understand that. I was always a caregiver, right? So anyways, we steal this freaking Honda and we go all the way down Riverside, and we ended up coming back to Riverside, staying at my mom and dad's house. My parents let him stay with us. He moved in with us, you know, and stayed with me while I was pregnant, and he was messed up. He had been through a lot of shit, suffered a lot of trauma, and anyways, we ended up breaking up because he was such a liar. He ended up getting arrested because the car was stolen. He ended up staying in a youth facility, basically. I don't want to... Basically, California Youth Authority. And because he wasn't 18 yet, so he was 17. And they kept him until he was 18. And they let him out. But while he was in there, he proceeded to lie extensively about me and our relationship and how we had twins and all this other stuff, because he was just a compulsive liar, and he loved manipulating how people saw him because, he, like I said, he suffered a lot of trauma. I ended up breaking up with him. It was one of the hardest things I had to do because he was still locked up. And so it wasn't something that I wanted to do while he was locked up, because that's not something that you can understand how that would affect their mentality while they're locked up. So that's messed up. But I did it anyway because I really needed to do that. So I broke up with him, and I ended up dating who I'm married to right now, Joel. But at the time, Ghost got out, and he was hanging out with other people and ended up committing suicide. He committed suicide, and that was hard, because I was barely like 16 years old, and I found out that he had killed himself. Him and Joel and me, I mean, we're all close. And he ended up committing suicide because of at the time it was over a girl. It was over a girl. I mean, he never even got a license. He never even got his driver's license. So I sorry if that triggered people, but I've had to carry that around. And for the longest time, I thought that he would just show up at my house. I really did. I thought that he would just show up at my house like it wasn't real. And then later I found out that was part of grieving. That's part of grieving. They're lost. Didn't think I'd still have tears over that, to be honest with you. I thought I dealt with that. But I really did love these people. Like, my family loved him, and we took him in. And, but we all have lessons. We all have lessons to learn. So, there's that. So here I am, 15, right? 16, I have this baby. I'm at the hospital, and Joel comes and visits us. He was there. He was at the hospital for Becky. And that was good. I think Joel got his first speeding ticket at the time for coming to the hospital, which is funny. But what a sweet guy. We ended up breaking up, though, later, because we were just in our addiction, you guys. You got to understand that this entire time I was running from emotions, and I was jumping from relationship to relationship, and I wasn't healing anything. It was just this baggage, this baggage of trauma, and I'm just jumping from one relationship into another, and I'm just dragging this shit with me. I'm never dealing with anything. Just masking it with dope, getting high on meth or weed or whatever I could get my hands on, dick, excuse my language, but that was something that I was hooked on to. Something I was hooked on too, and it's okay to like that. I've learned that it's okay to like it, and I do, and that's part of who I am, an extremely sexual individual. But I'm extremely loyal to one person, so extremely sexual, but extremely loyal to one person. Through the years, I've never really enjoyed cheating on people. I never really enjoyed hurting people, though I have. I've had boyfriends where they had moved on. They left their things with me so I could watch their things, and literally ripped off their stuff, sold it for dope. Things. I was awful. I stole from my parents. I stole things from my parents and sold them for meth. Anything I could get my hands on, any gold, jewelry, money, I would steal it, and I would sell it for drugs or whatever. I was awful, you guys. I suffered a lot of consequences for my behavior. because I just couldn't get my shit together. But I didn't realize that I was just jumping from trauma to trauma and dragging my entire baggage with me. I had no idea, you know, and also no idea that I had autism, so my inhibitions were lowered, and I really, really, really needed a lot of guidance through my younger years, and I didn't have it. You guys, I just didn't have it. You know, no right or wrong, I just didn't have the guidance that I needed. I didn't have the protection that I needed. I didn't have the tools that I needed. And a lot of us deal with that, you guys. A lot of us deal with that shit, you know. But it took me, you know, I one time I was hanging out with Mike Moore. Mike Moore is a dear friend that I used with. This guy, he was, for a period of time, completely madly in love with me and just followed me around. And he was the sweetest, kindest soul, I remember. But unfortunately had used a little bit too much meth, and his mind got fucked up. His mind got really messed up. Sorry for cussing. I don't mean anything by it, so I hope you're not offended. Anyways, Mike Moore was a kind soul, a gentle soul, but unfortunately used a little bit too many drugs and lost it. He lost his mind. I remember him having to get into the mental hospital, you know, to get help. And I hope he's okay today, because last time I saw him was in AA, which was awesome. I was able to see him in AA and in Rubidoux, at Rubidoux Alana Club. And I was able to see that he was okay. It was nice. I got to see a few people in AA through the years that got sober too. It was pretty cool. But now back to Joel, you know, we were just kids. He was 19. And at the time, I lied and said I was 17. He thought I was 17. Sorry, Joel, but yeah, we dated for a few months. My parents ended up taking custody of my child at the time. They took custody of Becky, which is not something that I wanted to do. Unfortunately, like I said, I wasn't able to use my voice. No one listened to me anyway, even if I did use my voice. So they ended up taking custody of her and raising her on my behalf, which is not what I wanted. What I wanted was my parents to help me raise her. I wanted them to support me so that I could raise her. But they didn't do that. They took her from me. And I think that because of that, that just, like I said, that added to that trauma and pain that I was running from, because I was never, ever, ever given space to speak. I was never allowed to talk about my feelings. I was never allowed to hold anyone else accountable for their behavior, right? I was never able to point someone else out. Like, they were perfect. It was me. I was fucked up. No matter what I did throughout my years, I was the messed up one, all right? And because of that, I basically turned into that, you know, through programming and conditioning. Anyways, Joel ended up breaking up with me a while after that, and you know, I just kept using, you guys. I kept using boys and drugs, and I was so confused. I had so much pain. I was so lost, and I just kept searching. I kept searching for people that would to relate to me, you know. When I was 17, I had a boyfriend that activated my Kundalini. I know now it was my Kundalini. What it is basically it's an energy that's inside your body. A lot of it comes across as anxiety, okay? A lot of it will come across as being anxious, but anxiousness and excitement is in the same place. It's the solar plexus. And if you just change that feeling of being anxious to excitement instead. So instead of I'm anxious about tomorrow, I'm excited about tomorrow. Right? So that energy that's inside your body has a name. And we have energy centers. I had no idea about any of that until my awakening. All right? I knew that there was energy moving inside my body. I just called it spirituality or the Holy Ghost. All right. So I called it the Holy Spirit or the Holy Ghost, but I didn't know exactly what it was. So I'm with this boyfriend, and the sad part is I ended up leaving. Like, I was with this person, okay? And the first time I saw him, it was like I knew I was going to be with him. Right? It's like I knew him. It's like I know you. I've known you before. You know, and we couldn't stop looking at each other. And then, you know, from that point, like, we were just together, like, and it was extremely spiritual. And it was just an interesting part of my time, because after that we like hibernated for like a week, because I was using meth and partying and shit. So we went to his apartment and basically slept for a week or something. I don't even know how long it was. Because back then we didn't have phones. It's not like I ran around with a calendar or, you know, anything like that. I wasn't working or anything. So I didn't really have to know like what day it was or any of that. And I remember one time I was walking to go get like drugs or cigarettes. And, I ended up getting picked up by these guys, and, I went with them because of promises, right? This is the scary part, guys. I almost got trafficked. They kept me in a motel room for 3 days. I wasn't very... This is my autism. I wasn't very smart, okay? I didn't understand. And see, that's part of the MK Ultra programming and conditioning as well, okay? So I was already susceptible to this, which is really, really scary. I was so close to being trafficked, you guys. These people had chloroform. They had chloroform, but they never used it on me. Anyways, they kept me against my will. Against my fucking will. For 3 days. Alright? And I finally got out of there and went back at what I considered home at the time. But I was fucked up. Like, I had just been fucked up for 3 days. And I couldn't be honest about it with anyone because I was ashamed, you know. So there's that. My parents ended up putting me on a bus and shipping me to South Dakota. And I don't even remember, like, why I left, how I left, where my stuff was. Like, I don't even know. Like, I don't remember. I don't remember any of that. It's so weird. But anyways, my parents shipped me off to South Dakota, and I was absolutely heartbroken because I had this soul tie. I had this soul tie, you know, with this person that I thought I knew forever. I felt like I knew this person forever. And so when they sent me to South Dakota, I was a freaking mess. I was a mess. And they sent me to my sister, and no offense to my sister, because my sister has her own life and things to deal with, okay? She was raised like I was too, okay? So, yeah. Anyways, so I get there, and basically my sister wants me to cook and clean and be her bitch. That's how I felt. All right, take it or leave it. But I was there with my niece and nephew, and I was walking them to school. She wanted me to clean everything, which was obviously fair for me to stay there rent-free, obviously. But at the time, I didn't understand, like, any of that stuff. Like, paying my way or being self-supporting, it just wasn't ingrained in me yet. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. I had been a runaway the whole time and lived on the street. I mean, I taught myself street smarts, but I didn't know how to pay rent. I didn't know how to balance a checkbook, but I could definitely hustle up money by stealing or whatever the case. Okay, so that's how I brought myself up. I had a lot of learning to do. But anyways, I kind of lost myself there, so I digress. Yeah, South Dakota, that was pretty awesome. I remember on the bus, this is messed up, guys, I'm sorry. Another traumatizing moment on the bus, because I ended up getting on the bus to South Dakota, and then I missed a transfer, so I didn't get off the bus to transfer in San Bernardino, and I ended up in Calexico. Because I've never been on a bus before, I've never done anything, I never traveled, I didn't know what I was doing, I was literally left alone to figure it out. And I had no idea what I was doing at all. I think people had way more faith in me, you know, because I didn't have a clue. I almost got trafficked from the bus, people trying to get me to get off on bus stops. I was just like, no, you know, no thank you. I was terrified to even get off the bus because I thought people were going to grab me. You know, I'm sorry, dudes don't have to deal with that. I have to deal with people just grabbing me off the side of the road and molesting me just because I'm walking down the street, you know? Dudes don't have to deal with that. I did. I had to deal with that shit. So I had to get on this bus. Now, the bus driver was cool enough to take me to his motel room, but he wasn't cool enough to leave me alone. He wasn't cool enough to leave me alone. I was only 17 by the way. It was awful. I was terrified. When I got to South Dakota, of course, I'm not going to tell anybody that. I'm not going to tell anybody did anything to me because I'm too ashamed. I'm too ashamed to say I got raped by a Greyhound bus driver. You know? And so I get to South Dakota and I end up having another Kundalini awakening. And this was because my brother-in-law unknowingly filled me with the joy of the Holy Spirit. Now, my brother-in-law, whether he knew it or not, had the ability to manipulate energy. And I'm not sure if he knew that or not. He might have. But anyways, I was so fucked up. I was just bawling. And I was missing somebody deeply and confused, not really knowing what to do, you know. And he ended up filling me with the joy of the Holy Spirit, and I ended up laughing as hard as I could, belly laughing for like, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. And then from that point on, everywhere I went, I spread joy everywhere. And because of my brother-in-law doing that, and me being in South Dakota at that time to get that activation, I was able to carry the joy of the Spirit to the darkest places on this planet. And I'm going to wrap it up there for now because, but I want to make a note here so I don't forget where I left off. Because this is important, but I don't want to get too far ahead. I want to stop here. And so please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if this resonates with you, please share my story. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.